Good morning, everyone. I'm Anamika from IncubateIND, and I welcome you all to the inauguration session of IncubateIND Developer Tech Camp. To introduce IncubateIND Developer Tech Camps, IDTCs aim to cultivate and inspire future leaders by accommodating a platform to share ideas and create a space for innovation. It is a platform where the innovators and industry experts meet from diverse fields. This tech camp is around one of the most popular technology of the decade, that is robotic process automation. Before we start with this tech camp, I would like to give you a very brief introduction about IncubateIN. So IncubateIN is India's largest and fastest growing community of technology innovators, including startups and student developers. Now, why open source? First of all, open source is required because it contributes to the projects that you help that will help you to gain deeper knowledge about the software. Then it also contributes to helping you in your reputation that can leverage your career. And then when you're using open source, your projects let you deal better with the potential risk and plan for the future. Before we start the session, I would like to introduce to all of you the keynote speaker for IDTC and be familiar with the process and schedule of IDTC. Mr. Kaushik Roy, who is the principal architect at IncubateIN, will be taking it forward. And I would like to suggest that to constantly keep an eye on the communication channel so that you don't miss out on any important announcements. Over to you, Kaushik.
Thank you, Anamika. Thanks a lot. And good morning, everyone, to all those who are joining in. So what we'll be going through is that today we'll be discussing what open source is. And first of all, before I begin what open source is, let me take you through the entire process of what we have been doing with IDTC, what actually IncubateIND Developer Tech Camp is, what its focus is, and how do we develop, indulge, and proceed ahead with these technologies. And first and foremost thing, what we'll be learning today, what we'll be doing today is that we'll be understanding the concepts of open source. We'll be trying to contribute to open source communities. So whether it is Mozilla, whether it is FOSS Asia, any big open source organization that is out there which you are dreaming of contributing to, you want to know what is the procedure, you want to know how to generate a pull request, what should be your first initial pull request about, how to actually contribute to open source. We'll be going through all that. We'll be trying to understand the principles as well as covering up certain topics like, hey, I am new to open source, but I too am aware of some technologies. What would be the best procedures? What would be the best guides? What would be the best process in which I should contribute? And what should be the step that I should follow? So I'll also be taking up questions. So do please feel free to drop in the questions into the chat section, and I'd be more than happy to help you at any moment of time. Apart from this, let's just, without wasting much of time, let's just share my screen, and then we'll be going through the entire process and trying to understand, and keeping in mind that we have also going through GitHub externship and exclusively open source event organization based, wherein you can contribute to organizations, wherein you can learn from different mentors, as well as if you are selected for GitHub externship for a 3-month internship, you definitely get a good amount of stipend. So money is always there with open source if you are a good contributor. So to get started, we'll keep in mind that we'll be going through the entire process. First of all, we'll be covering some basics, some little bit of bits and pieces of basics of how to use Git. For those who are unaware of what Git is actually, we'll be going through certain few basic commands, and then at the end we'll be going through the entire process of how to actually generate a pull request, how to actually get to understand which issue to raise hand to. So for example, if there is an open source organization, if there is an open source project, there may be numerous people who would be contributing to it. Let's say if we look into Mozilla or FOSS Asia, there are hundreds of people every day they're generating the pull request. So how do you stand out? How do you do that? How do you actually contribute to these organizations? Because that's the only challenge we face every day. How to actually get recognized between these 100 people who are trying to contribute. And first and foremost, and most importantly, if you are participating in events like Google Summer of Code, in externship, or in outreach, many similar events which go on, you need to be able to be found out in the crowd. So if I'm contributing and if I'm submitting a proposal for externship, the mentor should beforehand know. That would obviously be an added advantage. And if I have a multiple request, it definitely means that the mentors or the maintainers of the project do know me, and they would be able to do that. So let's get started. If we have any questions, I'll just pick it up. Meanwhile, I'll just share my screen so that we have a clear vision of what we'll be doing. Yeah, so basically what open source is now. Before we begin with open source, this specific workshop or this specific session, we will be covering what Incubate IND Developer Tech Camp is. So Incubate IND Developer Tech Camp is a series of tech camps that we have been growing throughout this last 1 year, wherein we have been introducing mentors, we have been introducing certain new technologies, whether it is open source, robotic process automation, any new technology which is out there, which is related to students or developers, and somehow we think that we can evangelize this technology, bring it to closer to the students who are unaware of these terminologies, these technologies, and you do want to contribute to it, you want to understand the process. We are here for you, we do it for you. So this ranges from 3 days to 4 days. We have done a couple of previous IDTCs, whether it was DevOps, whether it was RPA, GitHub Developer Tech Camp, or any other sort of tech camps that we have been doing. We have also done a couple before this, whether it was Digital Ocean Cloud Developer Summit, or it was such objectives like Smart Mobility Developer Tech Camp. So we have been doing this and we have got some good responses over here. But specific to this IDTC, that is open source, how do we actually contribute to open source? How do we interact with open source? The first and foremost challenge that me as a developer, when I was introduced to the entire open source community, was that how do I actually contribute to it? How do I actually come across it? And coming across is not the factor. The major factor is that how do I recognize the first good project which I'd be contributing to. So there are many things which come into mind when I'm talking about open source. First of all, you need to define your domain. The first segregation point for you should be, what is the domain like? Which domain are you opting for? And then when we move ahead, the second important thing that you should keep in mind is that, okay, let's say I'm good in Java or I'm good in JavaScript, and I also have some good information or knowledge about deployment and setting up pipelines. What do I do? So I'll look for projects which are related to DevOps plus have Java in their backend. Now this puts me in a comfort zone basically, and I'm aware of the facts. I'm aware of terminologies of how actually things work in servlet, of how actually things work by creating cron jobs, or how do I create multi-threads to run operations. So I'm aware of these terms. Now the next step which comes to our mind is that, okay, I have got a domain. Now I have got n number of organizations to choose from. So as a beginner, if you are beginning, there are 2 to 3 stages that you are a beginner, you are getting well versed with the code base. You are able to understand, you have learned all the tips and tricks of how to contribute, of how to interact with people. Then definitely you can go for larger organizations, let's say FOSS Asia or Chromium or Mozilla. But if I'm a beginner and I want to contribute to open source, what do I do then? How do I tackle those things? Because for me, everything is new out there in the open source society. So what I'd be doing, I'd be looking for mentors, I'd be looking for guides who'd be going through this. So we'd be trying to cover this all. We'd be trying to understand that how you create your first most important pull request, how should it be a good one, and then go through the entire process. We'd be doing it, we'd be practicing it, and then we'll be actually knowing getting to know that how do you represent yourself in the community. So before that, let me just take you through the process flow. So we'll be going through the workshop today, and then we'll be having a challenge. Let's say the challenge would be more of a fun activity wherein you get to enhance your skills of contributing to open source. You get to enhance your skills on how to actually devote your time, interact with the mentors, get yourself known, and generate a pull request and get it merged successfully. Because you can do n number of changes to the projects, you can do n number of modifications to the project, which is great, but if they do not lie in with the sync or in parallel with the project, that won't result in any good results. Being that is the ultimate final goal for you as a contributor, is that your pull request should get merged. So to get it merged, you have to align yourself with the scope of the project, with the vision of the maintainers, with the vision of the mentors. So this is it what we'll be covering today. And then tomorrow again we'll be joining in for the second workshop. We'll be going through the practices, we'll be getting to know the tips and tricks, we'll be trying to deploy using GitHub Actions. There are n number of possibilities that you can go through on GitHub. You could just set up your discussions, you could set up your task boards, and do n number of things that you cannot even think of. So why not use a git CLI, that is a command line interface for easy development, for easy handy development growth at a current pace wherever you want to. And then secondly, why not, the most important thing is that why not contribute and learn to utilize the tools. So there are n number of tools. You could create a project, you could add collaborators, you could simply just commit to issues, you can be a part of discussions, and we'll be exploring all those. So I hope it would be a great session, looking forward to, and you'll be having a lots of informative information over here. So with this, what we'll be doing is that let's just get to one of the projects. First of all, let us be aware of the interface of GitHub, because this is where all the action will take place. So we need to be aware of what GitHub is, how the environment is set up, how do I look into it. So what we've done basically is that we have created a repository for today's workshop, that is IncubateIND.com, github.com/IncubateIND/IDTC open source day one. And for the same, I'll just drop the link into the chat, and if you want to visit it and have a look at how to actually contribute. Yeah, that's a good question. There are many folders in that particular GitHub. So from which folder to start? And there are GitHub folders, test SRC folder. So from where to see the code? Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So for a first-time beginner, definitely this is a trouble, that how do I get to know which place to start from, where to begin, and how not to begin. So we'll be covering all this, and we'll be trying to tackle all these scenarios as well as contribute to the fullest. So let's say there are certain portfolios, there are certain parameters, there are certain guidelines which are set as a standard procedure when you want to contribute to an open source project. So we'll be covering that. But before that, let me just introduce to what actually GitHub platform looks like. How do you actually interact with the platform? So let's say I have dropped onto my GitHub. Now, what I'd be doing is that I'd be definitely be going to a platform or a repository where I want to contribute. So let me just get over there, and we'll try to interact and understand what the behavior of this actual repository would be to a first-time newcomer. So we do see there are certain features, we do see code, we do see issues, we check pull requests, we check actions, and then projects and wiki, and we'll be going through everything. So let's say I'm a developer, and first of all, I'll have to understand what actually GitHub is and why was it needed. So for that, let me just take a step back. We'll be trying to understand what GitHub is. In just a crisp, I'll not take more than 15 to 20 minutes in explaining what GitHub is, how to understand the principles, how to actually know that, okay, GitHub is what we can do over this period of time, because it is only a tool that you'll be utilizing. And while you are a developer, you'll be using multiple tools, whether it is for generating SMSs, generating mailers, creating APIs, linking other tools, linking other software development tools. Like you have to require to sync analytics, you have to require to sync certain other tools through which you can manage your project, you can manage your CMS, and while you are developing the code base. So GitHub similarly is a tool through which you can actually make your task easier, managing the progress, checking the progress, going through the entire cycle. So without wasting much of time, let me just jump into a project. And first of all, what I'll be doing is that I'll be creating a repository. So everything in a GitHub or a Git environment wherein you are contributing, wherein you are doing a certain project starts from a folder, because whether or not we have all gone through the days wherein we have created certain folders, we have worked on it, we have tried to communicate with the folder. Now what does usually happen is that that folder stays onto our systems, onto our computers or laptops or desktops, and then we are not able to push the code, we are not able to share the code to our fellow developers. So for the same, we required a tool which could sync up our code base basically and put it up on open source, that is a cloud, from where people whom I provide access to could able to contribute to it. So similarly, for the same, let's first create a repository. We'll try to understand what a repository is. We'll simply just learn a few basic commands and then just skip the entire process, because the most important aspect today, keeping in mind that GitHub externship is going on in parallel, we'll have to understand how to contribute, how to start by contributing, how to read the entire project, because the biggest challenge as a beginner is that how do I get to understand that what this project is about and what is the folder structure over here, which concept are they using for the entire folder structuring, how do I get to know the entire project, whether it is where the bug is, where the view part is, where the model part is, where is the controller, how do I set up the project onto a local system. So this is the biggest challenge that people face, and how do we come across these, this cannot be known. So we have to learn by ourselves, we have to explore the project folders, we have to go through it, we have to understand the entire process. So for the same, for this entire cycle of wherein you recognize the project, you recognize the, let's say, organization, and then you finalize down on one project, and once you have finalized the project, you go through the entire process, wherein the process includes that I'll be contributing to this project. But again, there's a big question for a beginner who is in a dilemma that, okay, this project has JavaScript, with this project has Java, this project has DevOps, this project has HTML, this project has Angular, and numerous other tech stacks. So, do I need to be foolproof? Do I need to be aware of all the technologies to understand the project, to actually contribute to the project? So, my answer would be no, it is not compulsory for you to actually know the entire tech stack of the project. But on the other hand, I'd also be saying yes, because if you are aware of the entire project, if you know how the project is working from inside and out, if you know that, okay, how is front end syncing with the back end, how is there a container or a deployment cycle set up for this project, how you don't know that, okay, how is MongoDB or some database is centered around here, and how is it connected to the backend, and how is backend relaying the same to the front end of your desktop screen. So the best way is that you know the entire project in and out, but in most of the cases it is not possible. Few of the cases it is not possible, because you cannot know all the language while you are starting. So as you will progress, as you will be growing, let's say 1 year down the line or 2 years down the line, you will definitely be knowing the projects inside and out. But for a beginner, the biggest challenge is that, okay, I have finalized on my projects, I have finalized on the tech stack, but the major question is that they are using a tech stack, a programming language which I am not aware of. And in this case, what I should do? Should I contribute to it? How do I learn to read the code? How do I learn to understand the code base over here? And how do I learn to actually communicate with the mentors? Because I may be a very good developer, but I'll not be able to contribute, because the reason is, if I'm not interactive, if I'm not presented a pull request in a manner which it should be. So let's say, for example, I've simply just written the code, And in the pull request, I have added the message. I have added a code, that being the commit message from my side. So what will a project maintainer look at it? Will he get to understand what is he trying to make sense out of it? They will definitely ignore it because actually they have hundreds of other pull requests to look into. And if your pull request message is not appropriate, if you are not able to convey what you have done in the code base in those couple of 5 words or 10 words, you would not be able to progress ahead. So these are the things that you will have to look into. These are the things that you have to cover up. These are the things you have to get through. So yeah, there are questions related to technical specifications. So without wasting much of time, let me just jump into it and then we'll cover up each of the topics. So let me explain the agenda for today. We'll be going through GitHub. We'll be trying to create a repository. We'll be understanding basics of repository. We'll be using basic commands such as commit, add, pull, and push. Only these, nothing apart from this, as well as creating a branch because these are important. And while you'll be working on the project, you need to understand that okay, there will be certain parts that you'll be going through. So first of all, first and foremost thing that we need to do is that we will have to create a fork of the repository. So let's say I am on a website. Let's just take the example of GitHub Extensive for now. Now I do know that I have to contribute among these organizations. So which organization do I select? Because this is the most important part. Wherein how do I select the organization? How do I work with it? So first and foremost, what I'll be doing is that I'll select the project. Now, if I'm over here on GitHub Extensive, what I'd be doing is that as a beginner, first of all, I'll enroll myself. But again, how do I select an organization? Because I'm left in dilemma. Let's say I simply just know some basic concepts of Node and nothing apart from this. So I'll look for the projects. Now, the projects should be, let's say, Livrise, there is hopscotch, there is both. Now remember, these are only 14 organizations which are present over there. Now how do I select from this that which project is most suited for me? So first of all, I'll look into the technologies present over there and I'll try to narrow down the objectives. So if we look into what we do see is that some of the organizations are actually using JS. So JS and Node.js is a framework of JS for those who do not know or are not aware of. So I can see that there are a few of the projects that I could select from wherein JS is mentioned. So I'll first of all figure out my comfort zone, my capability, because I could be good listener, I could be a good orator, I could be a good communicator, I could communicate my objectives, I could have great ideas. But in open source, you need to portray your ideas. You will have to let them visualize your ideas. So how do we visualize? We'll have to make those changes. And how do we make those changes? We'll have to contribute over there. So to contribute, we will have to understand the concepts of that project. We'll have to understand that technology because you cannot rebuild the entire project onto your favorite language. Let's say I'm a Java developer and I've come across a beautiful project which aligns with my mind that okay, I have certain ideas with mobility, and let's say that project is determined or is developed on Node.js, and currently I am a Java developer. So what do I do? For a lunatic, what he'll be doing is that he'll simply just remake the entire code base in Java, but you cannot do that. You have to get to understand, you have to get to the reality that you are working on a project which has been running for years, and to be able to come to that level all alone is not at all possible. So you will have to align yourself with the project. So first major task that we'll be completing is that recognizing a good project. So a good project for me is totally a relative term. So for a good project for me could be not be a good project for you. So let's say I am a Java developer. A Java related project would be good for me, would be suitable for me. But at the same time, someone who is opting for Node.js, that won't be a good one. So with this, let's just say I have narrowed down on the projects, organizations. I'll just have a look at it. Now, once I have looked into it, what I'll do find is that I'll find documentation page. I'll find the organization link. So first and foremost thing that you should do, that is the best practice I'll be suggesting, is that go to the GitHub organization of that organization. So I'll just go to this over here. Let's say I'm over here. So you need to assess the repository. You need to understand which project to contribute. Now the next part is that once you have finalized on the organization, you need to look into the repositories, because an organization has multiple repositories with different tech stacks. So how do you select the project? How do you work on it? How do you create different parts of it? So let's say I feel that this project or this repository licensing, not to get to know the entire crux of the repository or the entire crux of the project. How do I go through it and how do I finalize on it? So I'll look for documentation. I need to find out where the documentation is. I need to find out how the current structure is working. So for that, what we'll be doing is that we'll be going through, let's say I'll look for the documentation, and to do the same, I'll look over here. If it is present, then it is very good to go. Otherwise, I could also look into the repositories. I could do Google search, because one important part is that you need to be great in searches, because whether you come across a backlog in the project, whether you come across a deadlock, or whether you want to contribute, you will have to be aware of the terminologies. You will have to know how to actually do a Google search. Now, the next thing that we'll be doing is that let me just finalize on one of the projects. So I'll just open the documentation on the project that I have finalized. If the documentation is present over there, it is good. It is great actually. If it is not present, look for those documentation. Look for any markdown file, because in GitHub there's an important functionality. You could create docs. You could add those docs, and to recognize them, just look for .md extensions and you'll be able to find multiple markdown files over here, over there. So if you will look, a good maintained project on GitHub will have certain set of actual defined outlines. So there would be a read. A README is the entire crux of a repository. So by the name of itself, what it tries to say is that, okay, read me. So you need to read this document. You need to start from over here, because ultimately you will be going through this entire process, and to be able to know the inside out, you need to begin from somewhere. So what I'll do is that I'll just go through the entire process. I'll look into it. Let's say I'll understand the basics of the project. It feels good. It is sounding good to me right now. I'll look through different components. Try to understand what the project is all about. So over here, if we take the example of this project, it is Talava from one of the organizations. We get to know that there are different components and there are different repositories for the same, because each of them are based on different tech stack. Now, the next foremost thing is that you need to install the project, because before even contributing, you will have to actually run the code base onto your system. Because how do you know what the project is? Some projects, some open source projects have their releases present over here. So the first, what you can do is that you can check for release over here in the right hand corner of the repository. And if there is a release, what you can do is that you can simply open it up, you can install it and have a look at the entire software. But if in case the project is still under development and the first release has not yet been made, what do you do then? So for then, what we'll be doing is that we'll have to install the project to understand how actually it will be working. So look for installation guide if it is there. If it is not, most probably it would be present in the readme.md. Otherwise, simply just follow the link. So as a beginner, I'm just trying to explain that how can you actually contribute to open source. But for people, it is simply that okay, generate a pull request. But what about the nitty gritties? What about the fundamentals that you have to go through in this entire process, wherein you have to actually learn how this guide is installed, how actually this software will be installed. You need to understand those perspectives, because as easy it is to generate a pull request, anyone could just drop into a project, fork the repository, create a pull request, type a message, and done. That's it. That is what a pull request is, as a procedure, as a step, as a how to do. But the actual procedure or the ideal scenario which lets you get your pull request merged into the code, that's the foremost and important task. So for that, first of all, we'll have to install, because if we are not able to install the project, then it is for surety I could say that this is not the project for you. You should not go ahead with it, because if you are not able to install the project onto your local system, if you are not able to run the project, how will you test it? Even if you are a good developer, even if you are writing some great code for the project, how do you know that the code that you have written is bug free? How do you know that you haven't made any mistakes? That by mistake, what I do mean is that you haven't left any part of the code open, you haven't left any security vulnerability. So if you will not be able to run the project, then friend, it's time that you take a step back. It's time that okay, it's a clear cut warning for you that okay, this project is not meant for me. I should just take a step back and move away from it. That's the entire scenario. But again, if you are too dedicated, if you do know that if someone helps you to understand how to install the project actually onto your local system, and then you'd be able to do wonders. If you have that faith in it yourself, just go ahead, ask someone. And now there's an important task, that how do I make a point of contact with someone, how do I actually interact with someone from the organization. So in that case, again, we have a solution for it. Look for discussions. If that repository has opened a discussion, look for discussion. And if you find that okay, there's a discussion through which you can interact, just open it and try to contribute. If not, what you can do is that you will find basically all these open source communities, all these open source organizations or repositories have their own community, a chat forum. Let's say that could be Telegram, that could be Discord, that could be any place, that could be a Slack workspace. So look for it, because if you are facing any problem, now you are right now currently when you have selected the project and you are trying to install the project, you are the alone soul in the forest and you do not know which direction to go. And it would be great if there's some forester or some forestman who knows the inside and out of the lanes of the forest, which way to go and which way not to. So you need to find that person. You will have to attach with that person. You will have to try to connect with that person. And as you can see, people over here have tried to connect with the mentors, have tried to let them know that when you are trying to install the project, you are the alone soul in the forest. You are the one who knows the inside and out of the forest. So you need to find that person. If you are trying to contribute to one of the organization, the mentor of that organization would not be knowing that, hey, Kaushik Roy from this place would be trying to contribute to me. He would definitely never know. So what do I do? I'll have to make that first contact. I'll have to look for that. So there are huge tasks that you have to come across. You will have to finalize the project, you have to run the project. If you are facing any problem, you have to establish the contact with a person. So the next task is that how do I get to know which person to reach out to? Now that is also an important perspective or basically a procedure, because you never know, all these small pieces of work that you'll be doing would ultimately connect and become a larger picture, and that larger picture is getting your pull request merged, getting you a recognition that is required in the open source. So for the same, what I'd be doing is that the next step is how do I look into the project. So first of all, I'd search for any communication forum, any communication chat link which is present in the README. If there is obviously start from it. Now, how to know which person to contact? So for that, what you can do is that simply go to the contributors section, because sometimes the community persons are not that active in code development, but they will help you, guide you. But sometimes there are developers who actually do some work, have contributed certain lines of code, and they want you to actually come in contact with them. So from here in the contributors section, if you have opened the contributors sections of a repository, you can simply just select a person. You can get to know him. You can try to connect with him. So let's say, for example, I do have a clarity that okay, L'Oreal 876 is the actual person, he's the main contributor. Majority of the contributors have been done by him. And then there's Palasados, then is Rani Wallace. So whom do I contact to? So for in that case, what I'd be doing is that let's just say I'll try to get to him. So what I could do is that I will simply go over to his profile. I'll try to look into it, and there you go. You have got the links to contact him. You have got the Twitter ID handle. You have got the email ID. You can simply just connect to him. You could just ask him for simple questions like, "Hey, sir, I am facing certain issues. How do I resolve these queries? I'm trying to contribute, but I am facing certain issues. Could you please redirect me? Because these persons are themselves busy helping a lot of people. So just ask for redirection so that they can redirect you in a proper way to a chat forum, to an existing community which helps people. So just ask them politely that, okay, hey, I was trying to contribute. I am facing certain issues. Request if you could redirect me to a person who could help me with these issues. That's it, and that will do the work for you. So you have got the contact made. Now, once I have made the contact, the next step that I need to do is that I'll have to try to install. So let's open the installation guide over here. Yeah, here we go. So every setup, every project has 2 or 3 ways of installation. Some of the projects create a database and ask you to connect to that database remotely. Some of the projects ask you that you create your own database, set it up on your own, do the testing, and then move ahead with it. Because certain databases, certain projects have databases which require certain authenticated personnel, certain authenticated data, which you cannot populate on your own. So for that same purpose, you'd be asked to required to download certain configuration files. You will have to be required to set up an environment. So in that case, what we'll be doing is that let's look into this procedure. We'll go through it once and all. So let's say if in this case I am to install the Lava API, what I do need to do is that first of all, I have to clone this repository. And once I have cloned the repository, I'll have to go through this entire procedure of setting up the environment and then connecting with the database. Now, if I'm working on my own system, I'd be going through a standard procedure rather than avoiding a pre-made Docker container until and unless there's a database already populated with objects. I'll not opt for Dockerized container. So the next step that we'll be doing is that we'll try to install. And to install it, what we do need to do is that we'll have to fork the repository and then make a clone. That is a standard procedure. Otherwise, you could always just look into different perspectives. You can simply just clone this repository. Now, one important feature, one important question or confusion that new developers face is that how do I know actually whether I should clone a repository and fork a repository? And then the other big question is, why do I fork the repository? Why should I fork the repository when I can clone a repository? So we'll try to understand that as well, because that's an important feature when we be generating a pull request. Because to generate a pull request, we should have a forked repository, because that should be somewhere on a different base. So we'll be trying to do that. Meanwhile, I'll just stop this here for a moment and let me check if there are any queries, and I'll be able to Okay. Okay, seems like people are helping themselves out. That looks great. Now, the next thing that we'll be doing is that let me just set up my system so that we can clone the repository. So over here I am. Yeah, I'm over here. Now, what I do need to do is that I'll make a fork of this repository. That's the important task. So basically, what do you mean by fork, and what is the difference between a clone and a fork? So we'll try to understand that, and then we'll be going through the entire process. Yeah, you are able to contribute. You are not able to contribute open source due to getting errors regarding node package manager. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely try to help you out with that. First of all, let's get the project repository set up. So what I'll be doing is that I'll share the screen once again for ease of everyone. Now where is the project? Here it is. So remember, once you have installed the project, so to install I'll go to code. Now there are two ways, as I was discussing. One is that you create a fork of the repository. The other is how do you clone the repository. So forking is easy. Cloning is also a much easier procedure. You can directly have the copy of this repository. But again, why do we fork a repository? Because the reason for that is, let's say I have started development. I'm working on a project. I have started the development procedure already. Now, what I want to do is that I want to make certain changes. But remember, that project that you're working upon, the project which you is currently going on, would actually be moving ahead, would be traversing ahead. So, would you be able to cope up with that project? That's the question. And the answer to it is no. If it is an active open source project, you would never be able to keep in sync with the project because there will be hundreds of developers generating pull requests and their codes being merged each day and out. So how do you keep a track? Let's say you are developing a feature and someone just took away the part of it and created a new module on top of it. So how do you suggest those changes? So, for the same reason, you need to have your own environment. You need to have your isolated copy of the repository. So, let's say if this is the mainstream repository wherein you are working, which is the organization repository, and multiple other developers are coming in and contributing to it. At the same time, you need to make a copy of this repository over here, that is your own personal copy. Create a fork of the repository and then act on it. The reason is no one would be making certain changes to the repository. You would be aware of the entire fact, you would be working through it, you would be getting to know, okay, how do I make certain changes even while the project is moving ahead. I know where to add the code base. I'll create a separate layer. I'll create a separate channel. I'll make the changes and then I'll generate a pull request to connect my repository from the ongoing repository. So this is what we'll be going through. Now for the same, what I do need to do is that I'll have to create a fork. So creating a fork is as simple as it sounds. All you do need to do is that simply click on the fork button of the repository. Then if you are part of multiple organizations or multiple profiles, all you do need to do is select your own profile. Now what you will see is that once the fork is made, you will be viewing a screen like this, which will have your name over here, slash the repository name, and a statement below it saying that forked from Palisado's Foundation slash Talava API. That makes you understand that this repository is actually a rebase, actually a clone, a fork of the repository which is going in progress. Now, once you have got your own forked repository, what you do need to do is that let's say I'll know how it will work. I'll have to clone this repository. So what I'll do is that first of all, I can simply just go to the installation guide, or I can simply just go to code, copy this. Remember, to be able to run Git CLI, you need to have Git installed onto your systems. And I do feel that anyone who is trying to actually contribute to GitHub open source projects would have known how actually Git works, would be knowing how actually you can download Git for your systems, how actually you are aware of the CLI. So without wasting much of time onto it, what I'd be doing is that I can simply just open the terminal over here. I can get to the D drive. Remember to follow the screen precisely because I'd be doing a lot of tasks. If Anu just did, okay, let me just set it up for me. I'll try to get the screen to the entire size. So let me just put it up on the, yeah, that sounds perfect. Now, once I've opted over here, what I do need to do is that I'll have to somehow get to this location, the location where I need to clone the repository. So the location is cd incubate ind, okay, and press enter. So you are at the current location. Now what you do need to do is that you need to simply type in the command git clone, and what you will find is that there are none of the repositories currently by the name of Talava, but that would appear. So for the same, what I do need to do is that I'll have to type in git clone and paste the code base. Now, as soon as I do this, if you look over there, there's a folder which has been created by the name of Talava API. And now if I will open it and open it in Visual Studio Code or the code editor, yeah, here we go. What I do see is that the entire project has been downloaded over here. Now again, I'll have to look for the installation guide. So here we go. There's the installation MD. You can either go through this, which is pretty difficult to read. So I'll obviously opt for the one which is present onto GitHub. So I'll get over here. I'll look for the installation guide. Where did it go? Okay, let me just get down and get the link from here. Okay, got it. We are in some different project right now. I'll have to go to Talava API. Yeah, here we go. Now, just click on follow this guide and you'll be getting over here. That is installation. So let's say we are over here. We have cloned the repository. So we have done this. Now, what we do need to do is that first and foremost prerequisites for the repositories where you need to have MongoDB and Node.js already installed. So please do that before you. Remember, you will have to have all the dependencies pre-installed onto your system. Otherwise, the project would not run. Now, the next thing that we'll be doing is that we'll have to install Node Package Manager over here. So what we do need to do is that I'll just open the terminal over here. I'll write npm. What do I write? What does the instruction say? It says npm install. So I'll just simply run it. So while the package manager is being installed, what we'll be doing is that, let's just say we have installed the package manager. The next steps we can be aware of is that I'll have to set up a .env file. And in .env file, I'll have to set up this procedure. So each of them have different procedures. So we could do that right now. What we'll be doing is that we'll simply be setting up access token, setting up refresh token, and then creating MongoDB URL. So let me just look for .env file if it is present over here. So currently there's a .env sample. So I'll have to create a .env file. So I'll do the same and press enter. Now once that is created, I'll simply just copy the contents of env.sample over here to this place. While the process is running, what you do see is that there's an access token secret, there's an refresh token secret, and a statement above it says that OpenSSL generated 32-bit hex, which is randomly generated. Now, what happens is that OpenSSL is a certificate that you get for yourself, authenticating your presence that okay, this is my access token, and it contains a random 32-bit code unique to your system. So remember, to do the same, if you are having a Windows system, you will have to install OpenSSL and run it. Otherwise, you will have to, if you are having Linux system or Mac system, you can do the same on your own as well. Now, the next thing that we'll be doing is that once you have installed the project, now what do I do? How do I contribute? How do I make certain changes? So for the same, what we do need to do is that once we have run the project, we have made the changes. So let's say I made certain changes. Now, how do I add them? So I'll simply type git add period. I'll type in git commit and a message -m saying I have contributed. Okay, and then put an end to it. Now, one important thing, how do you know what should you make changes to? How do you know that if there are certain issues, how can actually we come across those and how can we actually make those changes? So for the same, I could look into the project, which is not this one, obviously, over here. And I can look into the issues which are currently open and suggest that, hey, I can do this, I can work on it. But before I do that, I'll have to learn that how do I know the contributing procedure. So for the same, I'll have to look for contributing.md. So each repository has its contributing.md file. Now I'll just look for it and here it goes. Here it is. So this is what actually you need to do. You need to recce. You need to basically recce the entire repository. You need to go through entire some folder structures, some files through which you get to know what is the procedure to contribute to this community. You get to know how to actually contribute to it. So there's certain steps on how to contribute to open source. There's a guide which you could obviously look into. And if I'll just open it, you'd land onto the famous open source.guide, how to contribute to open source. So you can definitely look over here. It's a long procedure on how to contribute and how not to contribute, what should be the code of conduct. So yeah, as I was speaking, so there it is, the code of conduct for this repository. I could go through different issues, pull requests, our development process. It explains that you first go through the issues, then generate a pull request, then you can contribute accordingly. So these are the things that you can do over here. Now, the next thing that you need to understand is that once you have finalized how to contribute, go through the issues. Issues explain to you that, okay, what are the current bug fixes or current problems that the developers or maintainers want to resolve. So for a student who is just beginning, just try to look for a good first issue. And the good first issue, if you look, you will find that, okay, these are the good first issues. Now, if you will just open it, let's say I open this one. You can read the instructions of what actually the maintainer of the project wants you to do. Basically, what does he want the changes to happen over here and how to make those changes. So we'll be reading through this, and then you need to take the permission that, hey, shall I be able to add to this? Will I be given the chance that I will provide you? Okay, I'll do this on my own. So what I do is that I'll simply just type in a writing to the person who has appointed this issue, who has created this issue, or to the person who has been assigned currently. So I'll simply just type a message. Let's say, Alexa Dose, hi, can I make changes to it? Can I make can I make the requisite changes? You will ask for permission first. And the best procedure is that the way in which you will making the changes, please do put it over there itself. So you will have to make those changes. You will have to make them understand how you will be doing that, because they do not know how you would be doing it. And if your process is better than the others, you would definitely be assigned the task issue. So for that same reason, remember to be as descriptive in few words as possible, because there would be many people who would be trying to do the same thing, but the way in which you'd be doing is unique, and you need to convey it to the maintainers that okay, I will be doing this in this procedure. So for the same, you need to do that. Yeah, the next thing that we'll be doing is that once we have done with this, what we'll be doing is that once we have wait for the response. If you have been assigned the project, if you have been assigned the issue, just go act accordingly. So into our own repository, which is present over here, make the changes, push the changes. And once you have pushed the code, what you will see is that, okay, .env has been added. Once you have pushed the code, what you will see is that basically you can get over here onto your repository. You will find that, okay, I need to make certain changes. I need to contribute to it. So how do I contribute? Once I have made the changes, once I had been assigned the issue, I'll have to let them know that, okay, this is the process through which I can go. So what I'll do is that I'll go to pull request. So to open the pull request, I'll have to make certain changes. So let's say I'm over here. I create a new file, name it as test.html. I'll just type in HTML5, some basic set of code. Get to the terminal, type in git add. Type in the set of code through which you are resolving the issue. So let's say I've resolved the issue through this. I'll type in git commit -m. Let's resolve and press enter. Now I'll just post the code. So if I post the code right now, certain operations will take place and the code would be posted. That is the issue that you have resolved. Now this is currently onto your repository, not on the ongoing repository. So what you will see is that this branch is one commit ahead of Palisado's Foundation master. So here we'll have to ask them to allow us to actually contribute. Now I will generate a pull request. So I'll open the pull request. Just check that it is merging or trying to generate the pull request to the master branch of the base. Get to create pull request. Write something that, okay, test result. Be specific over here in this pull request. You will have to convey that, okay, I am trying to write something. So for the same, remember, do not generate a pull request uselessly without any effort. Do not open a pull request because that's a lot of pain. Already the mentors or the organizations or the maintainers of the project are doing day in and day out of work. They are contributing. They do not want that useless people just drop in. So try to be as pure, as clear, because that improves your chances. So let's say I had been assigned the issue number 236. So I'll just type in 236. Mention the name of the issue as well as mention the person who had actually tagged you. And then click on create pull request, because I'll not be doing this. This is not the actual pull request that I am actually trying to generate. So I'll just leave it over there. Now, this is how actually you could generate a pull request, you can work with it, and you can make those changes. So this is basically how we work with it. This is basically the standard operating procedure to generate a pull request. So with this, I'll rest today's session. I hope I was able to cover up and help you all understand how actually to generate a pull request, how actually you should follow, select the organization and go through it. So these were some of the important features that you should have looked into. Now with this, I'll try to just wrap up the session. Remember, there's a task awaiting for you. We'll be dropping it in the LevRise workspace. We'll be creating an issue, and I request everyone to follow the entire procedure that is present. That is, you fork the repository, you create a clone onto your local systems, you make the changes, and then you generate a pull request saying that, hey, shall I work on it? So this is the process that you could do. If you do not want to do this, always get over to GitHub, look for certain organizations. The best way is that if you are starting, if you are just a beginner, go through the externship website, have a look at it, contribute over there, try to generate a pull request, and you'll be good to go. So with this, I'd be there into the left right workspace of the IDTC camp. If you have got any queries throughout the day, I'll be more than happy to help. With me, I'd be having Rex, who is Pratik from our side, so he'd also be trying to help you out with the queries. So thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll try to understand few more perspectives. We'll be getting to know the 101. Yeah, sure. I'll just share the link over here of IDTC. Someone has dropped here. The folder can be simply do, yes, you can do simply, you can simply do npm install. You could open a terminal in some other browser, but again you have to go to that specific folder. You have to go to that project folder. So for the same, you will have to type in cd and then that specific folder name, and then you go over there and you'll be able to do the process. So I hope I was a good host for you. Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. Anuj is trying to just bombard me with the questions. Thanks, Anuj, for it. Um, I have wanted to work with projects like Ruby, but it is really overwhelming. How can we make sure that contribution to GitHub isn't stressful? Yeah, that's the most important thing. Is that how you are relaxed and chill. So remember, select the project which you feel would be able to do and it aligns with your scope. Because again, if I'm a student and I haven't learned anything about rocket science and I simply just plan, okay, I'll contribute to NASA, I'll try to make the rocket, so that won't be possible. So select a project which is doable. If you are starting, if you are just a beginner, select a easy project, select lighter projects with some good first open issues, good first issues. Remember to find labels. Remember, contributing to open source is not only about your code, not only about how you code, but actually how you contribute, actually how you contribute, how you try to communicate with the mentors, how you understand the project. So look for projects, do a Google search, Ruby, about Ruby projects. In your case, you'll get a list. Go through the project folders. read the entire structure, spend some time. You will have to spend time understanding the project. That's the key. If you will not devote your time, you will not be able to contribute. So remember, spend some time, try to understand how you'll be doing it, try to understand how to understand the principles, what the project is actually trying to do, open the issues, go through the current issues. Remember that, okay, these are the things that the maintainers are trying to achieve. These are the things that they want in the project for further. And then once you have done all these, go through this entire process, then only start with the project. Then only install the guide. If you have got a release note, go through it. Install the project onto your local system. If you feel that it is good to go, fork the repository, clone it onto your system, go through the entire process, contribute. First of all, ask for permission. Each organization has its own guidelines. Usually, the procedure is that you go through by creating, go by reading the contributing.md, ask yourself to be assigned an issue. So once you are assigned an issue, just work on it. Pay your full attention to it. Try that you do not exceed the deadlines. Try that you complete it within a week once you have been assigned the issue. Once you are assigned the issue, you have generated it, you have completed it, generate a pull request. And that pull request message should have a clear cut message that, okay, I have resolved this issue. Let's say you have an assigned certain issue, resolve that issue, and the maintainer would be happy to look into it, and voila, you have the your code base actually merged. So this is what the procedure is. You will feel it too light when you are contributing. The entire process is too seamless. The only concern is that you need to follow the steps precisely. Do we have a Discord server for IncubateIND? Currently, we do not have a Discord server. We would be opening it up soon. We are actually quite active on Telegram. We are quite active. We'll be opening a discussion forum on our GitHub organization as well, for specifically for developers, because Telegram is for events, for getting to know how to resolve, how to attend a event, how to actually contribute to it. But if you are having specific issues with development, if you want to know how to actually contribute, if you have got queries in AR, if you have got queries in Minecraft, we'll soon be opening a discussion forum on GitHub, and we'll be getting hyperactive over there. So looking forward to all of those. Right now, for this event, we have got a Levrise workspace, which is also a partner of Externship. So we'll get over there, we'll try to understand, and then we will contribute. So this is it. Yeah, so to contact with me, so to connect with me, I'll just drop my you can connect with me on LinkedIn with @kroy96 handle, and I'm present over there on LinkedIn, on GitHub, any place that you want to connect with me. My handle is kroy96, and you can search for me, and I'd be more than happy to connect with you. So this is it. I hope I've covered up everything for all the queries, for all the tasks that we'll be doing. We'll be doing everything over onto Levrise. Yeah, you can connect with me. Let me just drop my LinkedIn. It seems. Yeah, I've dropped it into the chat. So thank you everyone. Thanks a lot. This was me, Kaushik Roy from IncubateIND. I hope we'll see a lot of participation. We'll see the same enthusiasm on day 2, and we'll be getting to understand the tips and tricks there would be on how to actually get your pull request merged, because there are a lot of tips and tricks. Thank you everyone. Thanks a lot. And there's a request from IncubateIND team, which I'm getting, that do subscribe us for such videos. Do subscribe us. I've dropped in my LinkedIn into the chat if you will look above. So that's it. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to having a great participation from you all. That's it. Over to Levrise, and all the best to the participants, whether you are participating in GSOC, whether you are participating in externship. Do remember, open source is just a step one. These are the step one of contribution. You will be recognized in the community if you are trying to contribute, if your pull requests are merged, and there are lots of tips and tricks on how to get your pull request merged. We'll be covering all those tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. As well as for those who are participating in externship, we'll be having a session at 7 p.m. tonight with organizations of ZV Fission as well as Zenetics. So do visit, have a look at it, and we'll go through it, the entire procedure. We'll try to understand the projects, we'll try to understand what ZB is offering, what the project is actually about, and then we'll move over to. Thank you. Thanks a lot. That's it for me. Thank you, everyone.